أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وأفضل الصلاة والتسليم على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. واللعنة الدائمة الأبدية على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم وقوله الحق. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stated in the Holy Quran in the chapter of Anbiya, chapter 21, verse 30, أَوَلَمْ يَرَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَنَّ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ كَانَتَا رَتْقًا فَفَتَقْنَاهُمَا وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ أَفَلَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in this verse, He says, and do not the disbelievers see that we created everything in the heavens and in the earth? Afwan. And do not the disbelievers see that the heavens and the earth were closed and we opened them up, and we made from all things water? Do they not believe? Allah says, Sadaqallahu al-Aliyyul Azim. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The topic of our lecture today is an important one. As you may imagine, after covering the topic that we did yesterday, the next and most important issue that might come to mind may have to do with a couple of things, but the main one that probably comes to mind is the issue of evolution. So today, inshallah, we will answer the question about evolution. Is evolution correct as a theory or not? And also, we'll tackle the issue of chaos theory, inshallah. And then finally, we'll see what kind of impact that has on our lives and how we see the world around us. Now, chaos theory is where we'll start, inshaAllah. Now, chaos theory, otherwise known as entropy, is a theory that is based on the claim that everything goes to a state of disorganization, unless otherwise organized, right? Now, yesterday we covered the issue of the fact that everything in this world is organized. So after having proved that, this issue of chaos theory becomes a mute point, doesn't it? However, what I will share with you, so for those who weren't here yesterday, I would urge you to listen to yesterday's lecture. Today what I'll do is I'll share with you a simple story, one that you can use on the young as well as the old, the unacademically inclined and the academically inclined. And it's a simple story. It's a story of a professor who had to attend a lecture where he had to give a keynote. This story occurred in Sydney, Australia. So everybody was waiting in the conference hall for this professor to come. They waited for a half hour, an hour and a half, 2 hours, 2.5 hours, 3 hours. He decides to show up finally. So they asked him, they said, why is it that you were so late? He said, well, today I decided to come to the conference hall walking instead of taking the bus or the car. He said, as I walked on my way, I came across a river. So I sat by the riverbank waiting for the twigs in the water to come together to create a raft. It only took about 3 hours. I got on the raft and here I am now. After I crossed the river, I was able to come here. So they laughed at him and they ridiculed him. And they said, that's the most ridiculous thing we've ever heard. He said to them, well, why is that so ridiculous to you when it's just a small raft? I don't understand how that can be ridiculous to you, and the notion that this entire universe, in all of its intricate details, could come together in a random fashion out of coincidence. You believe that, but you don't believe that a tiny little raft couldn't come together? Such a simple story, right? But it speaks volumes. DNA, RNA, right? cellular structures, mitochondria, right? All that stuff. Outer space, all that came out of randomness and coincidence. So this simple proof proves to us that there is no such thing as random or coincidental. So us Shia Ithna Ashari, us Muslims, we actually don't believe in the notion that things happen coincidentally or randomly. Now we proved that yesterday with the first proof of organization, if you recall. This is just the icing on top. I wanted to add this simple little story, okay? Now from here, this takes us to the idea of evolution. Now evolution is a theory. It was a theory that was posed by a man by the name of Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin introduced a book called The Origin of the Species in 1859. Now what's interesting about this book of evolution is that it's based on the idea of natural selection. Now natural selection is of two types. It's of a micro scale called microevolution and of a macro scale called macroevolution. If the words are too big, I'll explain what that means in a minute, okay? Now the idea of natural selection is one that is not foreign to us, right? We understand when we watch National Geographic or when we watch the Discovery Channel, right? We see, how certain cheetahs, for example, if they breed with a different type of lineage of cheetahs, that creates something called heterogeneity, meaning that there's a good mix within the lineage of the cheetah, for example, and that when you don't have enough animals such as the Siberian tiger, or the panda, that there aren't enough different types within that species, what ends up happening is you end up with homogeneity, which means that they'll move more towards becoming weaker and weaker, right? While the system of the natural world is based on a system of natural selection, meaning the survival of the fittest. So only the strong will survive, right? Those who are strong will be able to survive long enough to breed, correct? Today, the way that we breed in captivity is just to protect animals from extinction. It's by no means a means of natural selection per se, right? However, this theory of evolution is well rooted in the idea of natural selection. And natural selection is all about survival of the fittest. Now, microevolution is basically the idea that a species, in order for it to survive and become strong, only the strong will survive within it, right? The weak will die out, correct? And that will create small adaptations and improvements within that species. However, macroevolution, okay, is the idea that it goes one step beyond, that actually one species can turn into another species. And that's where we kind of place a huge question mark on that theory. We don't have a problem with microevolution, you see. We understand the idea of the survival of the fittest. I mean, we all watch the Discovery Channel, National Geographic, and we love to go to the zoo, right? And learn about animals, correct? So we appreciate the idea of natural selection as it applies to microevolution. We have no problem with that at all. Neither as humans nor as human Muslims, correct? The problem is the idea that some species could actually evolve from a different species. Now what's interesting is that nobody focuses on how it is that Charles Darwin suggested this theory in the first place. If you read his book, The Origin of the Species, you'll actually find that he posed the idea that when he saw a bear swimming and trying to catch fish in the water, he said, "Oh wow, that looks so similar to how a whale is. I can totally see how when this bear is in the water swimming and he has his mouth open, that this bear could at one point become a whale." Now the scientific community, after his book was authored, ridiculed this notion. They ridiculed it. What's interesting is, though today the scientific community admits the error within his book, they've adopted the actual opposite theory, that an animal could be in the water and then it would turn into a species that would be walking on the earth. You see? So the whole idea of evolution as we know it today, Darwinian evolution, isn't exactly what's taught today in schools. And I'm willing to bet you that nobody here actually knows about the story of the bear and the whale as it was posed in The Origin of the Species by Charles Darwin. Am I correct? You can say yes or no. Am I correct? Yes. Instead, what we hear about is the notion that humans came from apes. So the major concentration is on that issue. And the major concentration is on the missing link, correct? Now let me clarify something. The missing link is any link, not necessarily between the ape and the human being. It could have been the link that was between the whale and a land mammal. You see? Whatever link they could find between two species, that in itself would be entitled the missing link. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now the biggest issue that is discussed by creationists and outright contradicted by those who have a faith tradition when it comes to the theory of evolution is this idea that humans came from apes. They don't have a problem with the notion that a mammal that is a water-based mammal could have turned into a land-based mammal. They don't really have a problem with that, right? Nobody really has a problem with that. The problem we have is with the idea that we come from apes, correct? Now what's interesting is that the missing link itself, when it comes to the ape and the human, that to this day has not been proven. Now there have been many attempts. There have been. Lucy was one of them. A few other names that they chose were a few others that they used, and they suggested that it's the missing link. However, what they came to find out with time is that in reality this was another species, that this wasn't actually the link between the ape and the human being. Now the argument here is what? Isn't even the issue of apes and humans. The argument is made based on one quintessential notion that Darwin makes and the evolutionary scientists make, or anthropologists or biologists make within the theory of evolution. And if you study it, what you find is what Darwin suggests is that because of a mutation that is a random mutation, random. So in his book, he actually uses the term random. Scientists and anthropologists, and I've separated between scientists and anthropologists, I'll explain why in a minute. Scientists and anthropologists also suggest that the change that occurred from a water mammal changing to a land mammal occurred because of a random mutation. Now we proved, remember yesterday, that there's no such thing as random or coincidental. And today, we also gave that simple example of the professor in Sydney that there's no such thing as coincidental and random either. So that very notion of evolution, that theory, is actually based on what? On randomness. And you know what it suggests? It suggests that the blowhole of a whale randomly over time mutated so that it went lower down as opposed to farther up on the head until it became a nose. Randomly. You see? We don't have a problem with their suggestions. We have a problem, meaning I don't have a problem with their suggestion of adaptation, right? We all understand adaptation. However, what we do have a problem with is the notion of randomness. Correct? How many people knew that evolution was based on this notion of a random mutation? You can say yes or no. Good, we have two people who knew. How many people say yes? How many people say no? Most of you say no. 3 of you said yes. That goes to show you how much we really know about evolution, which brings me to the next point. What we know about evolution is what we learn in school or from the media, correct? Now what's interesting is that when we learn about the atom in science, we learn about the atom as though it is 100% real, correct? That the idea of electrons and protons and neutrons, that's actually exactly how things are, correct? Isn't that what we learn? Mind you, there are other theories, right? However, when it comes to the issue of evolution, no one discusses it as a theory. Everybody accepts it as a fact, except for the creationists and those who believe in the faith-based religion, right? Religions. Why don't we question it? Because the media has taken it and marketed it in a manner that has made it real to us. So the reason why evolution is no longer a theory for us, quote unquote, is because of the media, right? That has basically taken this idea of the secularization, it's all based on secularization, removing religion from science, right? And from knowledge. If I do that, then I'm going to be able to control everybody's minds. And if I do, then I move them away from religion, and based on that, I'm going to have a secular society that's highly intellectual. The problem is that if you're highly intellectual, you will know that this is a theory, and a theory is not fact. For those who study science, am I right or no? Yes or no? You can say yes or no. Yes. Now where does that take us? Shaykhna, is it true then that we came from apes? Modern scientific theory has not proven that we come from apes. Until they do so, we'll have that discussion. Okay? The question is, did this randomly happen? The answer is, what? Yes or no? No, because we proved that randomness and coincidence don't occur in this world. And we proved it intellectually. We rationalized it. Now the next question that should be posed is, okay, you say then that this theory is based on randomness, and randomness is a fallacy. Based on that then, we've just broken down the whole theory of evolution, right? Am I right? If we just hit on that one point. But Shaykh, now what about natural selection? You said we don't have a problem with natural selection. Yes, because natural selection is not coincidental. When it comes to microevolution, not macroevolution. The theory really lies in the macroevolutionary model, not in the microevolutionary model, you see? Make sense? Are you all lost, or are you still with me? Good, you're with me. Are you lost or with me? How many people say lost? How many people are with me? Huh? You're lost already? Yalla, Hissa we'll clear it up for you. So the bottom line is that evolution is based on a random mutation, meaning a random change, and we said that a random change cannot occur because there is no randomness in life, right? So that breaks down the entire theory of evolution for us. All right, very good, we answered that question. What's next? What's next, Said? I thought this was going to take longer, no? So now, what does this imply to me? What did I just learn right now? I learned not to accept everything that I'm taught in a book, or everything that I see on TV, or everything that I hear on the news. Right? But rather what I should do is I should ask and I should read. Am I right? And when I read, I should question. And when I question, I should question with sincerity. Because that's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will place the answers in my way. So, where does that leave me? Now that I understand that evolution is flawed, the scientists say that it's flawed. Well, Shaykhna, what about all these dinosaurs and, all that stuff? Are you saying they're not real? No, I never said that. Did I say that at any point? No. We believe in dinosaurs. Of course we do. Right? We believe in all those eras, the Cretaceous eras and all that stuff. We believe in the Ice Age. We believe in all that. I'm not talking about the cartoon. Good, you're awake. We believe in all that. We're just saying, show me the proof of macroevolution. Right now it doesn't exist. And if you're telling me that it's a random act, then I'm sorry, we'll have to stop there because my intellect doesn't accept randomness. Now, the next thing that's important to talk about is this whole idea of randomness. I'm going to take it one level more, one level farther. Those of us who have taken chemistry, how many people have taken chemistry? Good, so you've heard of something called Brownian motion, am I right? It's when a particle supposedly, quote unquote, moves randomly in a liquid. Now, based on the theory, or based on the arguments that we posed in the last 2 nights, is there anything random? The answer is, what? I can't hear you. No. So is Brownian motion random then? No. And you know who discovered the exact same thing? A man by the name of Benoit Mandelbrot. He held the position, the post of Albert Einstein for many years. He died recently. He holds 15 PhDs. And you know what he is? He is the father of modern fractal mathematics or fractal geometry. And what he proved is this randomness that you think, you perceive as being random, is actually a supreme form of organization. Now, the project that he was working on in order to discover this was he wanted to study the perimeters of land. You know where land masses meet water? You know how random the edges look once the water hits them, right? So he sought out to prove that this actually is a supreme form of organization, that there's nothing random about how land masses look. And he wanted to understand how to measure them. So in his studies, he discovered that everything goes down to an instance called a fractal. And that fractal is repeated over and over and over and over again until it creates a mass that looks organic. Now, we're used to things looking symmetrical in terms of them being round or them being square or rectangular. Things that are symmetrical to us and organized are things that tend to be what? Things that have straight lines, correct? But if you notice that everything that is organic doesn't really have a straight line per se. That's why it's organic, correct? Now, this organic nature of creation is based on this system of fractal mathematics. And he would be nominated for a Nobel Prize for his studies. Look him up. Benoit Mandelbrot. Now, what's interesting is that this scientist proved scientifically, mathematically, that there's no such thing as random. Let me simplify it, so that I explain to you how I don't even really need Benoit Mandelbrot. If I think of atoms, we've all heard of atoms, right? We know that atoms are made of a certain number of protons and neutrons and electrons, correct? We know that compounds are either compact and solid, or loose to be a liquid, or looser to become a gas, correct? Now, if everything in this world is made out of atoms, then that means everything is either made out of an organized compressed system of atoms, or a looser to be what? To be a liquid, or even looser to be a gas. So could there be anything that is not organized in this system of creation then? If everything is based on atoms and compounds? You can answer that question, yes or no. No, exactly. Everything has to be organized then. And this is basically what the studies of Benoit Mandelbrot proved. You see? I hope, inshallah, that we clarified the theory of evolution, that we came to understand that it is based on randomness, and that randomness and chaos are actually fallacies, and that organization is actually where it's at. I ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to brighten our hearts with the intellectual knowledge and the intellectual seeking of that knowledge that will bring us closer to enlightenment, inshallah. I ask that Allah allows you to continue to attend lectures that will help you come closer to the truth, inshallah. For that is truly what Allah, the Creator, wants of us. Now, we still haven't spoken about the Quran, correct? We did all of this just through intellectual reasoning. Inshallah, in the upcoming days, the next topic coming up, I believe, will be the Holy Quran and its legitimacy, and is it truly the Book of Allah? And I hope that you all attend, inshallah. Now, your homework for tomorrow. I want you to challenge everything that I gave you today. And I want you to come to me and bring it on so that we can discuss and we can answer your questions. Doesn't necessarily have to be something you believe in, could be something that you heard, could be something that someone posed. Yesterday, a brother and a brother came to me and he had a whole bunch of questions, 2 brothers actually, and alhamdulillah, they were all answered. So the only way we can answer them is for you to come and approach me, and we'll be able to, inshallah, come to the truth. آخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلي يا ربي على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين والفاتحة على أرواح المرحومين مسبوقة بالصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.